Well, hello everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast. I am Ray, your audiobook reviewer, and I will be reviewing some recent and classic LitRPG audiobooks for you. Today, I'm going to begin with Guild, a LitRPG novella, which is set in the Monsters, Maces, and Magic series, which would make this book 3. It's not a full book, it's a novella by Terry W. Irvin II. It is narrated by Jonathan Waters and has a book length of 2 hours and 58 minutes.
Josiah, Tom, back in the real world, had been studying to be a barber, having earned half the necessary hours to test for his license. That world and career goal was long gone, as was the party he'd transported in with. Fondar, their magic user, got bit by a giant spider outside the Darkheart swamp. Failed his saving throw, so the poison took him. That happened during the first adventure. The second, Tamshius the cleric, Croc the dwarven warrior, and Benny, their other magic user, failed their saving throws against the charming song emitted by a small flock of swamp sirens. Josiah made his save. He fought to free his friends, but as a thief that proved a brief, futile effort. Josiah escaped with maybe 1 or 2 hit points left and somehow made it back to Three Hills City. After that, he adventured with some NPCs, but the gold wasn't worth the risk, so he studied to be a lay healer. Luckily, his intelligence and wisdom scores met the minimum standards. After a brief apprenticeship, he opened up the barber shop. He gave up on the player character life, adventuring, and blended in with the city's NPC population.
So, I'm going to be really honest here. When I first saw the description of this book, I was a touch disappointed. I didn't see any mention of our party from the main series, and this looked to be like an internalized battle between different guilds set in the same world as what we've known. But it didn't seem to have, Gurk and the other characters, that were there, like Marigold and that sort of thing. And so I was kind of like, crap, as much as I look forward to what Irvin, because I really like what he writes. He does a great job with everything, and I'm probably going to be doing very shortly now, and I really promise this is going to happen. I'll be doing a What Else Have They Done, because he's got a couple other series out there that are really amazing. But I thought, it may not have the people that I know, but I will give this a shot. Because I knew it was Irvin and it was just going to be really good. I just wanted more of our old adventuring party, if you understand. Once you get into a series, you don't want to see the main characters disappear. That would be like starting Dragonlance, and after book 2, the next book would not feature like Tanis or Flint or Tasselhoff or Sturm or Raceland or Caramon or Tika. It would be a whole other set of characters, and it would have just like really thrown you off, like what the hell happened here. And that was what I was expecting. So I really started this novella, this book, with a little bit of trepidation, just to be square with you all. Guild is a great game lit short story, and I will call it that because I'm big on these short stories. I like something that it's like an amuse-bouche, just like a nice little treat from the chef, and I like those little one bite things that you can just, and it's perfect. It's a perfect bite. This is one of those stories. It's a great short story that tells a tale of our adventuring party that I was just mentioning, with Gurk and Marigold. But it's from the perspective of another player who's been lost in the game for a lot longer than they have been. A lot longer. The MC is a thief who has kind of gone semi-legit. He works as a barber surgeon in the wonderful city of Hills, but he still keeps his toe just a little wet on the seamier side of things, of the underworld with the Thieves Guild. He basically has become like a drop box for things that no one should know about, and he just keeps his head down, lets them do that, and he gets a cut of whatever comes up. So he's doing the thiefy stuff, but less so than normal. Because why? Every group he went out with got whacked, including his original adventuring party. And he kind of wised up and said, gee, there's something about adventuring that is really bad for your health. If you do it long enough, odds are you're going to die. So he decides he's going to go and do something differently. and he chooses to become a barber surgeon, because there they do like dentistry, like really the old barber surgeons used to do, lancing boils, pulling teeth, and that sort of thing. So his life as a non-adventurer isn't that bad. It just doesn't seem to be as fulfilling as he'd have liked. I mean, really, who dreams of becoming a barber after they were in a fantasy world, right? It just doesn't seem, something you would pick to do, especially when you played the game and then you ended up being a super character, like this pretty high level thief. Still, Josiah, that is the MC, by the way, he has lived a life free of monsters and mayhem, so he's kind of satisfied in that aspect of things. That is until one night, everyone's favorite half-goblin strolls into his barbershop looking to get a haircut. It turns out Gurk is just in time to kind of help Josiah battle against a rival guild that has targeted his establishment to serve as an example. Now, I have to say, I really, really like the treatment of this group from another character's perspective. And the question I kept waiting to be answered was whether or not he would cotton on to the realization that they were just like him. They were players who were trapped in the game just as he was. Now, I won't say if he does or not. I won't do that. But what I did enjoy was getting the realization that Josiah had actually noticed player characters, i.e., or that is, characters that were actually operated from the other side of the veil, so to speak. These were characters who were being controlled by players on Earth. So he could recognize the PCs from the NPCs. And that is what he suspects the group to be when he first meets them, when he first encounters them. He's like, aha, these aren't, your everyday average NPCs. They are PCs. And that kind of skews a whole lot of stuff and makes a whole lot of variances in what this world is really like, because he literally goes in and says, geez, I've noticed that the longer I've been here, the less PCs we have. Well, why would that be? Because people move on to different games. They play different modules, and he was in a specific module that he knew he was playing in. So, you would get PCs that would come into play, like if, let's just say from D&D, the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. You would have gamers that would come in and play that, and he would see them. Well, after that thing's been out for so many years, there are a few people that go back to revisit it. So the gamers have kind of trickled down and petered out for the most part. But the players controlled the bodies like they were puppets. And there was actually one NPC, and this is, like I say, Irvin really makes this interesting. He turns his stuff on its head, because there was one NPC that he thought was more than likely a former PC character, former PC who had been abandoned by the player. And so by the abandonment, she became an NPC. She became real, so to speak, in that world. Became a legitimate person rather than a controlled puppet. So seriously, there's some thought that has gone into this book, and I ate that stuff up with a spoon. And it helps that Josiah is a fun, interesting character, and I like his take on the main party. He's very observant, and he gives the listeners like a very different spin on things in their world and how they do things. He sees them in a much different light than you do as a listener in the first two books. So it's a pretty neat how he plays that out. And it's not something I've ever seen before. So, and I've read a lot of fantasy, and like I say, I'm probably more of a game-lit fan than LitRPG, if you want to be fair about it, because I was weaned on the role-playing games, and there's nothing I like better. I mean, if you ask me to name the best series I've ever read for this sort of thing, I would have to say, the Sleeping Dragon, Guardians of the Flames by Rosenberg, Joel Rosenberg, because that is a quintessential melding of characters who go into their world. And I really, really appreciate how well Irvin harkens back to that feel. And just so you know, the story is pretty short. It basically just centers around Gurk, the half-goblin, who was just kind of gone to see Josiah under the guise of getting a haircut, but it was really in the hopes of learning about his cursed dagger that he picked up in the second book. Now, all the action centers on what happens between the two of them, the initial meeting down to the appraisal, And I have to say, I really loved this book a lot. I keep saying that, but I did. Normally, I get antsy when an author sort of abandons their main team in favor of a side quest. Okay, and I'm one of those guys that I was actually in a side quest book. So that's hard for me to say, but I really do. I get antsy when you do that. But this works in a lot of ways. At first, because it includes the main party, okay, specifically, they are not overlooked or forgotten. They are there and they are important to the tale. Secondly, it is a short story that furthers the original storyline. It fills in information that they need. It gives them some gear and some new insights. And I think the fourth full book, will be even more interesting now because of this short novella. Because this was really just, it was a perfect blend of everything it needed to do. Now, Waters, the narrator, carries this story on his capable shoulders, and I've come to really appreciate his ability to tell a tale. He's really made this series a hit with me. Okay, I mean, I love his interpretation of Girk and the other characters. He does a Marigold, and see, that's the thing. When stuff popping up, and I don't even have Facebook on. Sorry. When you can have a narrator do a female voice that is plausible, believable, and enjoyable, and then turn around and do a half goblin voice in the same vein, and then do a normal voice, and then there's emotion in all three of those voices, you know they are a good narrator. And I have to say, the narrators, as good as this book is, if he had gotten a cruddy narrator, I could see where it would have fallen flat. Because another book in this show that I'm going to be doing tonight, I think it could have been a really much better book had it had a better narrator. And I have to say, if you are a writer and you are out there getting ready to go into the Audible world, and I don't know why you wouldn't, because I know Audible can sometimes give you 20 to 40% of your income on Audible if you do it right. If you're going to sell books, Audible gives you a good chunk of change. This right here is one of those things where if it were me, I would really on finding a fantastic narrator. People go nuts over picking covers, and covers are essential because I'll look at a cover and say, man, that book looks really interesting just based on that alone. I don't even have to read the book blurb or the book description or anything. I look at the cover. It looks great. Fantastic. I hate covers that are photographs that get shuffled around and rejiggered around a little bit, and you can tell it's a picture of somebody that just got painted over top of. I hate those kind of covers. I like art. So if it's an art cover, I'm going to be drawn to that more immediately than I would be if it was a photo cover. But the narrators, you really have to choose your narrators wisely, very wisely. And like I say, with here, Waters is a perfect fit for this book. Okay, he can do females, he can do monsters, he can do people. Everything he needs to do, he hits those notes. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. And you don't feel like he's struggling to do it. That's important. But not only does he do that, he carries the story. He breathes life into the characters. He has a nice pace and tone. I have, like I said, the one book here, the narrator does voices really well. He'll talk and do things, but at the same time, when he is not doing dialogue, he's very stiff and stilted. And I think that like a lot of the humor that's in this book, because there were points I thought, boy, if he had said this way, the timing would have been better. I would have laughed. I'd have found that funny. But the way he did it, I did not find it humorous. And so here, you really need to step back and say, who would be good for my book? So if you're an aspiring writer, or you're a writer who is getting ready to go into Audible, seriously, and this is from me to you, think about your narrator and really make a choice, because if you get a halfway decent narrator, you're only going to have a halfway decent book. A middle of the pack is middle of the pack, and you need to go and pick somebody awesome. Okay, that's why I applaud Dakota Kraut for giving Advent by Xander Boyce Luke Daniels as a narrator, because he didn't take a chance. He said, I know Luke Daniels is going to nail this. and it's going to be an amazing, amazing story. And he does it. I mean, that's it. He didn't go and say, "Oh, I'll pick somebody that can do it." He picked somebody that would kill it. And that's it. And that's what Waters does here. He really does a really good job. So kudos to Irvin for centering more on the half goblin and not rotating between him and Gnome this time around. Girk is a far, far more interesting character, and he's more fun to listen to. And I think that he and Josiah meshed really well together. And the interplay that Waters did with Girk and Josiah was pretty slick. It was nice to listen to. I enjoyed it a lot. So, it was good because, like I say, Girk is way more interesting than any other character in the party, because you've got Marigold, and let me just say this. It's a great running gag. She's super hot with big breasts, and everybody has issues with that. Then you have the not so nice fighter who is like lawful black, which is like, you're either black, white, or gray, I guess what it is. Then you have the party leader who is basically, he's pretty much lawful white, and he's a very, I don't want to call him boring, but he's a white bread kind of character in the sense that he does the right thing every single time, all the time. So, I don't think that, they would carry the story as well as Girk. And the problem is that the main character for most of the series fluctuates with the Gnome rather than Girk. And I understand why. The Gnome is the main character in the series, but Girk really kind of carries it better, in my opinion, from seeing this. So anyway, the final score, this is a solid 8.1 stars. It adds to the main series. It fleshes out the game world in a wonderfully sublimated way that doesn't smack you over the head, and I really enjoyed this a lot, and I think that you will too. So please give this a shot. If you haven't read this series, go out, get the first book, get the second, and then get this one, because they are all really good, and this book really fits in like it's like a touchstone, or you've got to have it where it's at to hold the other books together for the next book. Because it's a bridge, it's a gap. It carries you into it because it gives you a lot of information. And I'm actually hoping to see Josiah in the next book. And I would not say that. For a short story, I would usually say, Josiah was a throwaway character. He did his job. Let's get rid of him. I think there was a lot of stuff set up that was really interesting. And I could see the team, the main group there getting involved in this guild war. And I think it could be fun. And if they don't go that way, I trust Irvin to do the right thing. He'll take it wherever it needs to go. He knows his story, and he knows his characters. So 8.1 stars. It's a great short story. I can't talk about it any better than this. Just go out and get it. All right, so here, right here, you heard it first, right here. Here is the book that I've been waiting to get to since I started recording this show today. Advent, Red Mage, Book 1 by Xander Boyce. Narrated by Luke Daniels, with a 10-hour and 10-minute length.
One of his hands immediately began the series of seals to summon a dancing blade, while his other hand was still held flat and ready. Drew edged to the right, hoping to stay on the weak side of the spider, who was beginning a slow and painful-looking shuffle towards him. Opting to close the distance with the spider's weak side, Drew dashed forward. His cone of frost raked the arachnid's flank, encasing the left front leg and a considerable portion of its body in ice, just as it tried to slice at him with its leg. The sound of ripping cloth and the burning feeling in his arm told him that he hadn't dodged quickly enough. He mentally cursed the heavy boots he wore that made his already slow movement speed even worse. Still, he had managed to avoid being impaled on its sharp leg. Dancing blade flashed into being and immediately sliced towards the last good supporting leg on the spider's left side, hacking a deep wound through the chitin and causing blue ichor to spray into Drew's face and mouth. The nearly crippled beast took another burst of damage as an arc of electricity was emitted from his elbow, colliding with the already damaged leg. With a crack of protest, the leg gave out, sending the 100-pound spider crashing into the ground near him.
I don't think I've loved the story so much right out of the gate as I did Advent since at Dante's immortality. Okay, the book was incredibly fun. It was well thought out, had a nice MC, and fleshed out characters. I had to admit that there were some things that kind of scared me right off the track, and I'll go into it right now. The cons. Here are the cons. There are very few of the cons, but I have to say that at the very beginning of the book, we get hit with this like huge info dump on how the magic system works. And man, it came off as being so complicated. I felt like I needed to get out a slide rule and a calculator and an abacus, get my computer geared up, go take a physics course at college. I was like, holy crap. This is a massive amount of information, and I don't have a clue what the hell he's talking about. Seriously, it was a lot to take in, and it was a very sticky wicket for me to get through from, we take this gem, and there's these spirals and these designs, and this does this, and it increases in power as you do this. I was like, whoa, what the hell? I don't even know if I want to go through this book, because if I can't understand what's happening in the first 3 pages, I don't think I'm going to make it through this book. I was really concerned. Now, admittedly, once the book started flowing and the magic was shown in action, it all made sense. Okay, it all made sense. And it became infinitely more simplified. And I don't know if it was just the way that he put the information out there that sounded like it was complicated, but I think it sounded complicated. But once it got into action, I think he should have just kind of flowed into it, maybe done baby steps with explaining things. It would have worked a little bit better. And I'm not saying this was bad, because like I say, I'm going to say this is a con, but the book magic system, it was really cool. Really, really cool. I believe it's one of the cooler systems of magic that I've ever read about. And let me tell you, it makes me think of a point back in the 90s when like fantasy, was in full swing. And, I used to go to Gen Con, and they were like, okay, who buys like, $500 worth of RPGs a year? And I'd be like, oh, I do. And who buys, 600? And oh, I do. And who buys 700? Oh, I do. And by the end, it would be like me with my arm up after $1,000 worth of RPG stuff, because I just blew cash on RPG stuff all the time. That was my life for years. I love role-playing games. And there was this thing where they were just like, okay, we want to have a good fantasy series, but we want a magic system that really stands out. And there were publishers who would like, if you took a fantasy book to them, it could have the greatest characters, the greatest setting, the greatest world, the greatest plot, and it wouldn't matter. They wouldn't give a damn if your magic system wasn't amazing. The first thing they would say is, the book's nice, but what about the magic system? How does this work? What kind of magic system do you have? Is it new? Is it unique? And let me tell you, this book would have knocked your socks off back then, okay? And it would have been snatched up in a bidding war, okay? The magic system is really, really neat. And I have to say, I like how it progresses. I like how it's used. I think it is very smartly done. I think that it is very lit in the way it is done. And, so I always think of Ramon, because I know Ramon is like, well, the book's good, but it's not that lit, so I'm going to get it. And that's just the way it should be, because this is the LitRPG podcast, right? Okay, I do the audiobooks, and he handles the regular books, and I do keep my eye out for the LitRPG stuff. And like I say, I might say I'm a Game Lit fan more, and that's not exactly true. I mean, I love LitRPG a whole hell of a lot. I just have a special place in my heart for Game Lit. But this really, really has this vibe to it that you don't get most times when you read a book. Like Delverse is like that. Them eating the little Dolos balls. That was a neat little thing. But this kind of ratchets it up a couple notches, and you go, holy crap, that was really smart. That was really smart. So it might have been a con, but it wasn't that big of a con after it got started. Like I say, it scared me for a little bit. I was like, oh my God, I'll never get through this book. But then, man, I get into it, and it was just rolling along. Now, another con, and this is one I am not going to let go of so easily. The MC is in the Coast Guard, okay? And once things kind of go crazy, the advent happens. He meets, the people he meets, they kind of agree with the situation the way it is, that everyone has been trapped in this intergalactic navy somehow, that their regular ranks no longer really matter. Okay. And that's because there's the people he's with that will say they are newer members of the Coast Guard. They've only been in command for a little while. And the MC, he really, and it's Drew Mikulik. I keep calling him MC. It's Drew Mikulik. He really takes command immediately. Like, he does things that no one else can do. He inspires people, and everything about that, it was just well played. They're like, why the hell should we worry about what my rank was in the Coast Guard, or if I was in the Army or whatever it is? Because those things no longer exist. The world we knew no longer exists, and that's how they play it, right up until the time that they come across a real officer, and then they all of a sudden defer to his commands. And that kind of just like, it threw me off, because it was so against character, not only for Drew, but for all the people who he had survived with up until that point. Because they all kind of said, yeah, this stuff is really not making any sense anymore. And then we get two officers, and they're like, oh, nope, we got to follow that guy. He's an officer. We got to do what he says. And I was like, what the hell happened? That was like, it was just such a turnaround and a flip. And to me, it was just like, Xander had said, well, I got to have something here. So I'll just do this. But I mean, honestly, as powerful as Drew was, I'd have just told the cat to kiss my ass and just kept on walking, because, he couldn't compare to what Mikulik could do. And to be honest with you, they do sort of circumvent his orders, but they still back down when he finds out. And that was a real weak point in the story for me, and it still bugs the hell out of me. Days after I've read this, that Drew Mikulik would kowtow so easily still bothers me. It was very out of character. One other con, one last con I have is Zoe. Xander, I need resolution on that fact. I need to know what happened. I don't want it to be a negative thing. Okay? I won't go any further on who Zoe is or what happens to Zoe, but I need to have resolution with it, one way or another, okay? Just close that door, because there's things you can let slide, and that is not one of them. Now, for the pros. Hey, the rest of the book is the pros. Seriously, this is one smooth spread of peanut butter over a chocolate bar. I had a ton of fun seeing new monsters, in addition to new takes on old ones like trolls and goblins, or was it orcs? It was like really neat to see those, and I loved like the way that the deceased changed too. They became like these big Chewbacca monsters that would just go out and kill people. That was pretty slick. I like that a lot. And, they're right on the cover. And like I say, a cover will sell a story. So, when you're watching this, it kind of looks like this cross between Chewbacca and Ukla the Mok from Thundar, chasing, or coming towards, I should say, Xander as he's casting one of his spells. And I was like, well, that looks neat. But it was the fact of what they were that was really cool. I think that, Boyce really pens a powerful tale here. He draws you right in. I mean, this is, like I say, this is probably one of the best premiere books that I've seen somebody come out with in a long time. Like, seriously, the book, it just knocks you down the whole way through. I don't think there was a slow spot in the book. I do not think that the book had any issues other than what I said. And like I said, the magic info dump was one thing. And that was it. Zoe is really not relevant in any way to anybody but me. And the out of character stuff, I could let that slide. I could give that a pass. But the book is just great otherwise. I mean, there's just nothing wrong with it. Drew is slick. He's a smart cookie. He's tough. He's intelligent. And he's a blast to watch get put through his paces. In spite of the OP nature of his abilities, he is fascinating to watch and grow. And I loved the scene where he talks to himself. That was funny. And I like that a lot too. Because he kind of plays himself out exactly like you would think. He's a guy who's a normal dude, and he's thrust into extraordinary circumstances, and he struggles just to keep himself and his people alive. Oh, and that's another thing, okay? Another thing that I really liked about the book, people die. They're done. Dead. No more. Characters actually get killed. For real. For real. And in tragic and terrible ways. It's not like they just went to sleep one night and never woke up. They get their butts killed, okay? And I mean from the core group of individuals. I don't mean, some random off the wall. You meet these guys, you get to know them for a little while, and then next thing you know, they're done. They're gone. And you're like, well, that was impressive. Because I firmly believe that you have to kill characters in order to maintain realism and interest. Because if you know no one's going to die, there is no threat. And I have a book next week that I'll be talking about just that very fact, that it was good up until a certain point, and I was like, I can't believe they did this, because if they had left it the way it was, it'd have been pretty cool, okay? But when you kill them, when you know they're gone, and that death ain't just the beginning, it is actually the end, that's good writing, okay? It lets you know that just about anyone can buy it at any given moment. The only one you know is never going to die is the main character, right? The minute you stop having the main character, the book is over. And they can die in the last book. I mean, Xander, Boyce could say, hey, Drew Mikulik is great, and there's 2 other versions of him that I've got to work with later on if I kill off version 3. So Drew version 3.0, he buys the farm. We could go on. We could. So technically, no one really feels safe in this series. I like that. I like that a lot. It's really, really important that you do that. Dakota Kraut, a lot of people are really happy the way his book turned out, because it is bloody fantastic and smart. And I say that as a publisher, because this is his break-in book for his publishing house. The one that came out, and then this is the audiobook. I think he scored big time. I mean, if you want to know the truth of it, he hit the big time with this, because I think Xander Boyce looks to be at the level of Corvin or Wilmarth or Kraut and Dean, just to name a few. I mean, I could go on and say, oh, these people are right here. These are the big names in LitRPG. Cooper. I mean, I'm not even going to try, because I'll miss somebody and I'll get mad at myself for not saying, like James Hunter or something. He is at this level already. First book out of the gate, he is right there with them in the pack. He is that good. I enjoyed this book a lot. He knows how to craft and tell an amazing story. Final score, 8.4. And like I say, the only thing I really had problems with was the big, huge info dump. And then the kind of backtracking on the character after they kind of established, first off, that he was a big, powerful leader unto himself, and that he didn't need to listen to anybody else. And make him say, well, maybe, I have had people get killed. Maybe I'm not the best leader. That kind of makes me take a couple points off, because otherwise he was doing a fine hell of a job, and I was really liking that a lot. So could have been a smidge higher, but 8.4 is still nothing to sneeze at. This was a great book. I really, really liked this book a lot. If you're looking for something new, something heavily lit RPG, with a cool new system, neat new monsters, and a likable main character, don't pass this book up. I don't know what you're waiting for, if that's what you're looking for. And I'm sure that's exactly what you need. Go out and get this. Because Luke Daniels, I didn't even mention Luke Daniels. Luke Daniels nails the narration of this story. And again, I always say that, when it comes to narrators, I have a hard time talking about like really great narrators, because there's only so many times I can say, well, Luke Daniels, he does these here voices, and after he does the voices, he has emotion to it, and he has this tonal quality that I think is really fantastic, and he knows how to, when there's comedy, he can hit the mark every time, and stuff like that. I really struggle to kind of make it new and fresh when it comes to that. And that's why I didn't even think, as I'm going through this, I didn't even talk about Luke Daniels at all. Because That's how good Xander Boyce's story is I listened to that story and I didn't even, it didn't even feel like I was listening to the story. I was living the story. And that's where I say Dakota Kraut was smart. He did not just pick any old narrator off the shelf. He picked a top-of-the-line narrator. Like I say, I've got my favorites. You know who they are. If you've watched the show once, you've heard me say it 300 times who they are. Luke is one of those narrators I really enjoy a lot. And he picked somebody who's not inexpensive, but was going to kill this book and carry it right through the roof. Smart move. Smart move again, Dakota, because this book really benefited from having an awesome narrator. If you'd chosen somebody else, and I'm just going to say middle of the pack kind of person, the book would have been great, but it would have been good, but it wouldn't have been great. Because they would have knocked it down somehow. They would have deflated some of the power, the energy of the book. And Daniels does not. He amps up the power in this story. And that's why I say 8.4 stars. To me, I could go higher, but like I said, I have to knock off a couple things. But it sure as hell is not because of narration. Narration is not a problem. And it's not because of writing. It was just because of a couple little bips on the screen. The radar said boop, boop, and that was it. And I said, okay, those are 2 points off right there. But otherwise, the book is really good. 8.4 stars. Go and get it. All right, so the next book that I'll be reviewing is the anime trope system, Stone vs. Viper, by Alvin Atwater, narrated by David Reimer. Is it Reimer? I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. With a book length of 6 hours and 47 minutes.
The monster dodged Clyde's attack and then bashed Toru to the ground with a single swipe of heavy claws. Enemy activates Wave Bound. A glowing blue circle appeared around the monster, then expanded faster than Clyde's eyes could see. It struck the party hard enough to send them all flying backward at least a yard. The white that was around the enemy faded. Your HP has dropped to 50%. Clyde sucked in a breath, enduring the pain as much as he could. Harumi stepped forward, held up a hand, and like a fountain of joy, healing light bounded from her, joining the party in an embrace. Your HP has been restored to 70% and is slowly healing over time.
You may, if you've paid attention in the last couple episodes, have recently heard me say that I am a fan of anime, but only really hit on maybe 3 series. The big ones being Naruto, Inuyasha, Cowboy Bebop. I have watched a lot of others, but I'm really only devoted to those 3. I've seen Death Note and Full Metal Alchemist and Bleach and Dragon Ball, etc., etc. I'm sure all the stuff you guys have seen, and if you're really into it, you've probably got me beat by a mile. But I may not be as knowledgeable as some other people out there about what anime is and the tropes it produces, but I do understand it. I've been watching, these shows for 15 years or whatever it is, or more. So, hell, I go back to Speed Racer. If Speed Racer isn't anime, I don't know what is. So, I've been there. So I really thought I would give, I would love to give this book, the anime trope system, a shot and see how it set in comparison to what I know about anime tropes and how it was. I was actually kind of excited about doing this book. So first of all, the narrator, David, I'm going to just say Reimer, is going to play a huge factor in the score of this book. So I'm going to start with him. Okay. And I want to say he is not a horrible narrator. He does do voices and he adds inflections, but his normal reading of the non-dialect bits really drops the ball. I mean, I have to say it was hard to tell if some of the bits would have worked because there were parts where I would have said this would have really funny. I would have laughed at that had it been told in a different way. There's timing that has to be done and involved, and there has to be a pattern to the way things are set up. And he just fell flat with that because he would do the voices and he would, hey, I got to go beat this guy up. And then he went over to the store and bought a sword to go beat the guy up. That was kind of how it was. There was a lot of emotion to the voice, or at least there was more emotion to the voice than there was during the narration portion. But the non-dialogue bits just they were down. A different narrator would have probably pulled this book up because he did not have a voice made for comedy or comedic moments. In anime, lots of things are exaggerated, including the way characters react vocally. Angry girls yell really loud and they talk really fast. That's how they go. If someone gets knocked for a loop, and they, in a less serious anime, they exaggerate their pain as their pain as they moan, as they speak, like, ooh, yeah, that really, that knocked me silly. They do that sort of stuff. Now, there are more serious animes, but like I say, this did not feel like it was one of the more serious animes in any way. There was a lot of stuff that told me it was trying to be the more funny parts of it. And again, it may very well be funny in the written form. I could not tell because of the delivery of the narration. And that is the problem you have sometimes with narrators. And again, I'm going to just say, man, if you're going to pick a narrator for your audiobook, really research it. Really pick somebody who fits what you're going to do. In this case, I would have found somebody who liked anime. Somebody who could have said, oh, I know exactly how, this guy would react here, or this girl would react here. Like, when they got hot and bothered, the girls would have like this, they would have this lovey-dovey voice. And there was none of that there. Like, he just did not have the notion for what it took. And that's what you have to check out when you do your narrators. So please, because I don't want to really come back here and say this book was horrible because the narration sucked. In this case, the narration doesn't suck. It's just not, it's just not amazing. It just did not do what it was meant to do. It was more mechanical. And it didn't grab my attention. If somebody, Bueller, anyone, that's not going to snag you up to want to listen to something. And again, I don't want to bash, but if you're going to narrate anime, do some research. Go to Crunchyroll, watch a few shows, get a feel for what the tropes are like so that you understand things, understanding, not having the narration fill in like it should really hurt this book. It really did. Now, there were a few things that Atwater did as a writer that bothered me. One, I could tell when there was a typo because Reimer would say a wrong word, or, instead of women, he would say woman. And that's a simple thing. And I always say, like, the narrator is the last line of defense against typos. And as much as I say that, I can't blame the narrator for reading what is written down. And it drives me crazy because, that's one of the things, like with books. I know a lot of people that have ebooks will sit there and say, this book is just filled with grammatical errors and it drives me crazy. It would be a really good book if it didn't have these problems. And it's the same thing with the audiobooks when the narration is reading something and it's just not the right word or things like that. It just bugs me. This is not Reimer's issue. This is Atwater's. But again, there were other things that I had issues with. Now, here's why. Okay, at first, it really felt like this was going to be a kid-friendly novel. And that's great. I have kids, and I would love to be able to share some of these LitRPG books that I read with them. And I know the ones I should stay away from most of the time, like Randy Darren. I don't think I'll ever let my 7-year-old listen to Randy Darren. Maybe not even my 17-year-old. But with that aside, there are people like, Bathrobe Night by Charles Dean. We listened to that in the car, and it was very enjoyable. So I'm always looking for something that I can listen to with my family, because I do this stuff all day long. And if we're in a car somewhere, I can listen to a family-friendly book as we go, and I can sneak that in and get that in while they all enjoy the book too. Because I do have to listen to shows, to books for this show. So it felt and sounded like a kid-friendly book right up until pow, like these sex scenes started popping up. And here's my thing. In every anime I've ever seen, sex is pretty much hinted at. So there might be some groping or, I don't know, but that's about it. It did not fit the spirit of the story, especially for anime itself. And honestly, if he was going to go full hentai, I wouldn't have had an issue. but he should have said that in the title, like, anime hentai trope system or something along those lines, and I would have just been fine and it would have been perfect. But, on the hentai topic, I have to say, and again, this goes back to the writing, I was really surprised at how casually he would drop the F-bomb all of a sudden. Like I say, it came out of nowhere. Like, it just seemed like somewhere a switch got flipped, and he said, I don't want to write like this anymore. I want to add in this other stuff. And again, that's his prerogative as a writer. But it just kind of it was like, okay, and then F-bomb. And I'm like, well, where'd that come from? And then every time one of the women in the book would see that the main character was aroused, they would grab him by the horn. Okay. That certain part of the male anatomy, I get where you say, I'm horny. But I think maybe referencing it as a horn once is more than enough. But numerous times, it was really just kind of, it was kind of gross to me after a while. I didn't like that terminology. There are a million other ways to refer to phallic things, especially the phallus itself. The horn is just not a euphemism I would prefer. It just felt very out of place again. And I think this book would have benefited from one cohesive vision. Like I say, it felt like this up to a certain point, and then it became this. And it just kind of, it just couldn't make up its mind of how it was going to be from the start to the finish. And if you're going to, do anime, then you keep the style how they talk. I have never heard Inuyasha or Kagome utter the F-bomb. Never. Additionally, the book is called Stone versus Viper. And we never even get to see the Viper until the very end of the book. And I'm going to just be honest with you. There's no verses here. Okay? There's no verses. The main character does not fight the Viper in this book. And I'm sorry if that's a spoiler, but I'm getting that out. That way you don't read the entire book going, when the hell does the Viper show up and when do they fight? Because it never happens. I'm sure it will happen in book 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5. I don't know. But that was a bit of a disappointment for me. I understand he was leveling and that the Viper was like super, super duper, duper, duper powerful. He's like Dragon Ball Z on crack and meth and steroids, all rolled into one. That's how badass he is. But it was kind of a letdown and a disappointment to have that expectation going in that you're going to have the Viper fight the MC. And it just did not happen. Overall, I think this book had some real potential, but it didn't make me not want to put it down or not stop to listen or listen nonstop. It was one of those things I could have just put it down and walked away and not come back to it for a long time. But again, I don't do that. I push through. Thankfully, the book had a shorter runtime than average. It was not a super long book. If it had been 9 hours or something, I would have had some issues with it. But it was shorter. So that's a blessing unto itself. And again, the book has potential, and you may enjoy the written version way more than you will the audiobook, because there are just issues with the audio. And again, you'll notice I really didn't even tell you anything about the story. Okay, there was no point where I say, here's what happens. And I'll just do that real quick. In the story, there's a guy on Earth. He gets snatched up by some googly monster. He's put onto an anime world and told he needs to level up to fight a guy called the Viper. And the book then goes from him leveling from 0 to 20, whatever it is. As he goes through, he fights demons and monsters and that sort of thing. And there's this bizarre rape scene that's in there. And again, like I say, it did not feel anime to me. It felt hentai. And I'm not a huge hentai fan. Not that I hate it, but it's just like I said, this was billed as anime, and it kind of came across more hentai. And I just wish it was stated as that. Because, like I say, the rape scene was just really, really out of place. And I'll just say it was a monster that rapes a character in the book. And it happens repeatedly where this thing comes up where the monsters are trying to have sex with the adventuring party that goes out to fight. And it was just like really weird. I mean, I just didn't get the whole thing. And it was like one of those running gags where, oh, he likes monster girls, and like I said, it could have been funnier if it was written rather than read to me, but I don't know. It was just bizarre. So that's a rundown of the book. It's just basically a guy going from 0 to level 20 something, trying to build himself up to prepare to fight this guy called the Viper, who really only shows up after everything's said and done with at the end of the book. And he just says, look, I'm so tough and bad. I'm going to just go do some crap, whatever I want to do. And I'll meet this guy, find him, and I'll kill him real quick. So again, like I said, I don't want to spoil it, but basically that's the whole gist of the book, is just him leveling up from 1 to 20, and kind of gathering himself a harem throughout the book, because he has different girls who fit the different anime tropes as they go. So, that's the whole thing. And if that sounds like something you would enjoy, like I said, he builds a harem. He has, I don't want to say a lot of sex, but there's sex. There's monster sex. There's, that sort of stuff. If that's your cup of tea, then brother, this is your book. Get it. But for me, I'm going to score this 6.6 stars, because I think that a better narrator would have ratcheted up the score a bit, and keeping the book more steered toward the way anime is rather than hentai or whatever. And like I said, it just didn't feel as anime as it should have. The characters, yes, but the overall storyline, no. Like I said, I never saw, Moroku the monk get raped on Inuyasha. It just didn't happen. So, it was a problematic book for me from start to finish for various reasons. 6.6, like I say, if you're really into anime, you may like this better than me. Like I said, I've been watching anime for, oh my gosh, since my kids were kids. So, my daughter's 23, 24. So I'd say probably 20 plus years at a minimum, like I say, but I'm not into it that deeply. But I've been there for a while. So, you may like it better than me. Okay. So this segment is going to be my Is It Lit segment today. What I wanted to do was, I have heard a lot of stories about cultivation books and things like that. And of course, I just read Cultivating Chaos and by William Morand. And then, of course, you've got Dakota Kraut's Divine Dungeon, where they cultivate. So I thought, I got to find one of these books where cultivation's key. And I know there's this new stuff out. And I'm going to say, I know I mispronounced it because I don't speak Chinese, but I do look things up. And I would call it wuxia. And it's not wuxia. It's pronounced differently. So anyway, this is one of those pronounced differently type books. And the one I want to do is called Unsouled. It's part of the Cradle series. This is book 1 by Will White. And that's not my Elmer Fudd imitation. It's the proper name, Will White. Narrated by Travis Baldtree. And if you haven't listened to this guy before, you really should. He's really good. The book length is 8 hours and 14 minutes.
Information requested. The Spiritual Origin Test of Sacred Valley. Beginning report. Twice a year, the clans of Sacred Valley test the spirits of their children. Boys and girls of 6, 7, even 8 summers line up before their clan's elders. They wear clothes too formal for them, layered robes of muted color for the boys, intricate shade silk wraps for the girls. Parents line the walls nearby, anxious to hear the nature of their children laid bare. One by one, the children step before their clan's first elder. He holds a shallow bowl, twice as wide as a dinner plate, that contains nothing more than still water. But it is not water, the parents know. It is madra, raw power of spirit, purified and distilled, the material from which souls are made. The first girl in line dips her hand into the bowl, shocked at the cold.
Here I am. I'm back to Is It Lit? Is it? I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, I've been hearing a lot of this stuff about wuxia. And since I've been looking for like some Asian written LitRPG, which has been translated, of course, just like the Russian stuff, because I really enjoy our Russian compatriots. I need something with like some more exotic flavor sometimes. And I've been hoping to get Asian styled lit. And so this wuxia thing, which is actually pronounced Usha. Usha. So I won't pronounce it Wuxia anymore. I'm going to say Usha. The Ushia stuff falls right in line with what I've been looking for. Because it is, and Usha is about martial arts. That's basically it. It's martial battles, martial heroes, and that's it. That's all it is. So, as I said, I'm a big fan of the 36 chamber, and you want to talk about it? I'll tell you. You call me up, I'll talk to you about Last Dragon all day long. There are some movies, like I say, I'll be the first one to say, I grew up in the 70s, so I can call them chop socky flicks, and it's not being degrading. I am a chop socky fan. I watched Bruce Lee. I watched Bruce Lee with an I instead of two E's. I've watched Jackie Chan before he was Jackie Chan. I have watched so many of those movies that this feels like coming home. And you're like, Ray, you say that about everything. You've played RPGs and you've done this and that. I had a pretty extensive childhood in which I was enmeshed in, a lot of pop culture. That's just the way it is. And sometimes I went right off of pop culture and did crazy stuff. But in this case, I can say Westerns and Easterns, I was right there. I'm looking for a Chinese cowboy to come rolling through one time. And actually, I had a story in my head about this Japanese samurai who came over and became part of a Native American tribe. And I thought, man, that would be like a great story. I just never got around to writing it. So I really do love Asian style stories. And Usha is one of those things that really appeals to me. So I don't think it's too much to ask, later on, as I'm going to repeat myself, for a LitRPG book from China or Japan or South Korea or Thailand, wherever you want it to be written from. They can do those books. And so this was a book I was actually going to preview last week. But what with Cultivating Chaos being out and all, I kind of set this aside because I didn't want to conflict with that, because they're very similar in style. And I also wanted to do, not Is It Lit, but I wanted to do What Else Have They Done? Because I've done so much more Is It Lit. So with that, I said, okay, I'm going to put off Unsouled for a little while longer. And in fact, I've actually been able to do Unsouled for probably 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and I just have not gotten around to doing it. And this one I thought would pair well with the anime Trope series book. So that's where this comes from now. So I am going to do that. But like I said, I had to do What Else Have They Done last week, because sometimes people just need to be spotlighted. And this fits, though, with what I was talking about. So that's why I'm here right now. Now, the novel starts off in a pretty standard way, like, most of these stories do. Basically, there's kids lined up. They're going to go learn what their powers are, and that'll dictate where they'll fit into society and so on and so forth. What they'll do for a living and where they'll be. And the MC, the main character, Lyndon, comes from this really powerful family who's really famous in their parts for their martial skills and that sort of thing. But he discovers that he is unsouled. They do this little thing where you stick your hand in water, and wherever the water kind of congeals on your hand, it tells you whether you got this ability or that ability or whatever. And the water just says, whoop, and it's gone. And he's like, crap, because that means he has no soul. And that means he can't learn techniques, because you have to have some sort of affinity for one of these things in order to, become a martial warrior. You've got to become a martial artist. You've got to have that. So it's kind of like he has no key. There's no power inside him. And it's a huge disappointment, but he is still, I will say this, most other books would have made it where the family shunned him or made him an outcast. That's pretty much not the case here. He is unsouled, but his mother and father still cherish him. They just don't treat him quite as well as you would hope. He ends up getting this special fruit, and it would have helped him in some ways. But they're like, well, we know it would be good for you, but how about we do this? We'll give half to your sister and a quarter to your mother and a quarter to me, or half to your father. And, they keep going, well, you don't really need this fruit. And, so he's not exactly right up there. They cherish him, but he is not like the top dog in the family. The sister, who is the martial person, does carry the family honor, so to speak. So what he does is he goes on that sort of journey that you expect. He goes out to find some techniques or gain some powers. And what he does is he kind of stumbles upon this technique that allows him to jank up other people's, ki. So, he hits them and they're out of power. Well, now they're used to using their strength from this energy they have, their cultivations or whatever. And he has had to rely solely on martial arts to survive against them as they practice in school. Well, of course, when you rely on your magic or your power, and it's gone all of a sudden because it's been disrupted, you get your butt kicked. So he ends up doing a lot of stuff, and he advances, which is really great, but it's kind of like a cheat, and no one really respects it. But he's like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care if you respect it. I don't care if you like it. The fact is, our motto is win by anything necessary. Do whatever it takes to win. And that's what I'm doing. And so they can't really fault him for that kind of philosophy, because that is their philosophy. Win by any means necessary, and don't be ashamed of it. But they do kind of try to shame him for it. But anyway, so he starts to advance a little bit. And now here's the thing. Right when he does, and this is where I say the book does not follow the path of direction that you would expect. You don't see things coming. So right when he is at this peak performance attempt at this arena where he is competing, this competition, he's done a couple things. Now, first off, what I like about Lyndon is he's my kind of character. He relies on his wits and uses trickery to succeed. So what he did was he had gone in and he had set up this little trap so that if he's getting his behind beat, he stomps on the floor and releases these really nasty wasps that will attack whoever he tells to attack. So he's got this little secondary thing backing him up in case this comes up. So you think, okay, he's going to go here, he's going to do this, and that's going to... Nope, that doesn't happen. What happens is, right as he's about to do certain things, this overpowered evil overlord breaks through to the earth, and they kill his... Well, I can't say that, but anyway, there's a lot of murders that go on, and all of a sudden, this higher being comes down and kind of undoes everything. But she kind of takes a liking to Lyndon because of all the people there. He knew he had no strength, no power, and he still tried to use his little screwy technique to disrupt the bad guy's power. And, this angelic character says, that's what I'm looking for. Somebody who is fearless in the face of death and danger, knowing that they can't survive, but he still did what he had to do. So she kind of takes some pity on him and does some things with Lyndon. And she gives him a nice vision of the future. Well, I can't say it was a nice vision of the future. It's a vision of the future that he has to change. And in order to change, he has to become more powerful than anybody in his land. Okay, that's his mother, father, his elders. He's got to beat the pants off of them power-wise in order to avert the disaster that is coming. And that is, like I say, where the book, when you first see it, you think, okay, this bad guy that shows up, this is going to be where he does things, and then Lyndon is going to go out and struggle to gain power, to stop him and to get revenge for what he did. And that's not what happens at all. So he gets sent to his other school, and there's this brilliant scene. Like I said, he is a sneaky SOB. Really, really sneaky. Where he gets dropped off, and they say, okay, you have to climb this stairway up this mountain, and you have to reach the top in order to be accepted into our school. And no one expects him to survive, and he does this really sneaky thing to get into the school. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it just totally endeared him to my heart, because I'm like, man, that is just my kind of character. I love guys who pull tricks, who outwit. Those are my peeps. I enjoy those characters so much more than the guy that just, okay, I'm going to just punch you to pieces or I'm going to stab you to pieces, because those are a dime a dozen. Okay, you can read about Conan all day long, and yep, you can only thrust a sword so many ways. But to outwit, your teachers and your classmates, and do it in a really slick way that you don't get caught, is always fun to listen to for me, especially. Okay, so the book really, really does not go where you expect it. Even when he gets to where he needs to be, he's not there long. Things happen and it changes. So it's like you think you're going here, and then he goes here. And then you think he's going to stay there, and then he goes over here. And then he goes here, and then he goes here. The book takes you just one direction after another that you have no control over. And you don't want control, because each change is far more interesting than the one that preceded it. So, this is one of those books that I really enjoyed. Usha is something I really want to get into more, but I'll tell you more about Is It Lit here in a little bit. Travis Baldree narrates this tale, and he totally kills it. And I would love to see him get into more LitRPG stuff, or at least some LitRPG stuff, because he always does an amazing job. And let me tell you, if you ever want to hear one of the most mind-blowing audiobooks of his, aside from this one that I'm talking about, check out a book called Dog Walker. The title is not amazing, but the story is. It is not what you expect, and it is brilliant. So, it'll blow your mind in the way things are. And it does have an Asian flavor to it as well. So, Unsouled is a place for Baldree to really shine. And I've heard him in several other audiobooks, but he really stands out here. Great voices and pulls you in with the emotions of the MC. The only real issue I had with the book is that most of the secondary characters are not fleshed out all that well. But truthfully, for a book of this length, you can't get a whole lot of background personality shoved in to every single secondary character or third tier character there is. They're going to be just like caricatures, or they're going to be just basic, this is who they are kind of things. Not a lot of nuance. And again, I'm not discounting that, because you really don't care most of the time. The ones, this guy's an ass, and that guy's a jerk, and this guy, that's fine. That does it. And his mother and his sister and his father all love him, and they help him in any way. So, there's a lot that goes on in this book. It's really good. I did like the Usha aspects, but I would like to have seen something that was a little bit closer in tone to Cultivating Chaos. The cultivation part was not really here for the most part. I didn't really see it or feel it. So, you're going to say, is it lit? And I'm going to say, no, I mean, not at all. Maybe there are other Usha books out there that are close to being lit RPG, and I'll listen, because if you say here's one, I will check it out and see what I can do with it. But really, the only thing that it had in common with LitRPG, this book, was Lyndon's need to level up constantly and get stronger. And really, even that was not like, you've reached level 13. You have now, unlocked. No, it wasn't like that at all. I would be hard to even call this game lit. Hard pressed to call this game lit, just because, of the way the book is. I've had several people suggest this book to me to take a look. And I know other people that have told me, this is a great book and you'll love it. And they're right. I did enjoy it. I did love it. I will definitely be listening to the rest of the series. However, I will caveat that I will not call it LitRPG. I cannot call it LitRPG. I can't call it close to LitRPG. And I knew that about a quarter of the way into the book when I saw how things were going. But again, I started to see if it was lit. I didn't want to stop. And I enjoyed the book. So, it really has a lot less of a feel than most of the other books that weren't LitRPG. But I'll be on the lookout for other Usha books in the future. And again, with this, I don't do a score on is it lit, just like I don't do a score on what else have they done. I'm just trying right now to tell you if it is or is not LitRPG. And in this case, this is a hard no. But I would not call it a hard pass, because if you like Cultivating Chaos, you'll like this book. It's very much in the same vein. It just does not have the lit elements, or even close to having lit elements to it, that you would hope for, a is it lit segment. Like I say, most of the way into the book, early on, I knew it was not going to be lit, but I still kept through it. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot, and I don't regret it. In fact, like I said, I will get the rest of the series 100% down the line. I won't miss any of them. I enjoyed this book a lot, and I think you will too. But it is not lit RPG. It is not remotely close. I can't pick one thing in it that I would have thought was lit RPG. Sorry. Well, that's our show. I would like to thank you very much for everyone watching today. I do appreciate you taking the time to watch or listen to the show. If you would like to support us, I always ask if you could to like the LitRPG Podcast page on Facebook or on YouTube, or just like and share these videos. It doesn't take a lot, and we appreciate all the support we can get. I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed the show. Please, as always, I will ask to leave comments or suggestions in the section below, and feel free to tell me whatever you like. I do enjoy the feedback. As always, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. And remember, please, 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 leave a review for any book that you've listened to or read. Authors really depend on reviews. For the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast, I'm Ray. Keep listening.